Welcome into the Talkin Tide podcast. I'm Chase Goodbread, the sports columnist with the Tuscaloosa News, joined by Travis Reier, long-time Alabama coverage guy. He's been a beat guy. He's been an analyst. He's been an opinion guy. He's done it all. And looking forward to getting through the season, the 2024 season, with our listeners and viewers. Travis, Western Kentucky up first for Alabama. Home game. 6:05 kick at Bryant-Denny Stadium on Saturday. ESPN broadcast debut, of course, career debut, Alabama career debut of Kalen DeBoer. Supposed to be 90 degrees at kick, Travis. So August not going down without a fight on the final day of the month.
Yeah, you kind of get what you deserve. You play football in August, September, as we know, typically not much better. But hey, if it's just 90 and it feels like 90, you'll take that at Bryant-Denny Stadium on Saturday evening. And look, there's some other games around the Southeastern Conference. How about that Miami-Florida game, 2:30 at the Swamp? We've been there. We've been in that stadium at that time of day. We know what that can be like. But hey, it's football. Nobody cares, right?
You just want to get it going. ABC on Saturday has a Moses Malone box out on the best football. Do they not? I mean, early slot, middle slot, late slot.
They wrote the check.
Yeah.
I mean, you write that kind of check, then you expect to have the sort of Saturday that the ABC, ESPN family of networks will have on tap. I mean, they got it. You're right. They've got everything really now with the SEC. They're going to have Texas A&M, Notre Dame primetime, and then they're still going to have Kalen DeBoer's debut on ESPN. You're going to have that Miami, Florida State, Georgia, Clemson. Yeah, you wrote that check.
And back again on Sunday with LSU and Southern Cal for you from Las
Vegas. Flying Herbie all around, a private jet with his lab, with his golden retriever or whatever that dog is. But life's good right now if you're Kirk Herbstreit.
What about Kalen DeBoer, Travis, getting started game one at Alabama? I can't help but think back to sitting in that Bryant-Denny press box in 2007 as Nick Saban got started against Western Carolina. The Catamounts, Travis, of course, were Saban's first game. You and I seated beside each other for that one on what was at the time a 50-yard line seat in the Bryant-Denny press box. No longer 50-yard line seats.
Every year I would wonder in that press box, when are they going to wise up that we're sitting in the most expensive seat in the stadium? And they did.
On money.
They eventually caught up to it, but no, it's
the wrong guy scratched his head one day.
Yeah, but you're right. That seemed like yesterday that you had that game at Bryant-Denny. So 17 years came and went pretty quick. Goodbread.
Terry Grant, as I recall, ripped a 50-plus yard touchdown run right out of the gate en route to a big day for the Crimson Tide.
That was a big one. And then, the start of that season for Nick Saban in year one wasn't that bad, but then it was an 0 for November.
Right.
That team ran out of gas, had some issues, some fraying there within, I think, but then rebounded to win that bowl game out in Shreveport. We made that trip a couple times.
Yeah.
And so that was a positive end and really a springboard for what came next. Expectations are a lot different for Kalen DeBoer in year one because of the way he found the program compared to Nick Saban taking over in 2007. Little different situation for Kalen DeBoer than it was for Nick all those years ago.
Little less tolerance for a 7-6 year in 2024 than there was in 2007.
Yeah, all the fire alarms will go off if there's a 7-6 type of campaign, but you don't expect that to be the case. And it's a very interesting opener because there's a lot of things that we still have to learn about this Alabama team. We think we know at least partial answers to a lot of the questions, but still some blanks for this team to fill in, especially in that secondary, perhaps at right tackle on offense. How exactly will that wide receiver rotation play out? How will Jalen Milroe fit into this offense? How will, likewise, Kalen DeBoer make this offense fit with Jalen Milroe? So a lot of interesting things. And then Western Kentucky, a team that 53 new players on this roster. Western Kentucky brought in 33 transfers.
Jeez.
One of them being TJ Finley, the starting
Mm-hmm.
quarterback that Alabama throughout the years has faced at LSU and Auburn. So even with Western Kentucky, we know Tyson Helton's done a nice job up there, a bowl team year in and year out. But that's a roster, too, that has a lot of questions.
Yeah, TJ Finley 0-2 against Alabama as an SEC quarterback, threw for under 150 yards in both of his cracks at the Crimson Tide. Comes to town now with Western Kentucky. You got Willie Taggart Jr. on this squad too, Travis, wide receiver, son of the former Oregon and Florida State head coach. And what about Will Friend on that offensive coaching staff, who, of course, was an Alabama player, mid-90s guard, and a damn good one for Alabama.
Stallings ball era, Will Friend. Always remember that. And you've got crossover with the coaching staffs too, because Nick Sheridan has coached at Western Kentucky in the past. Jamarcus Shepard has coached. Here recently, Brian Ellis, Alabama's tight ends coach, just a 3 years ago, was up there with Tyson Helton, and then moved on to Clay Helton, Tyson's brother at Georgia Southern. So it's an incestuous business, the coaching ranks, I guess you could say. But there's plenty of storylines, more than you would think, that go beyond just, and I say just, it's big enough on its own, Kalen DeBoer, game one as a successor to Nick Saban.
Offensively for Alabama, let's kind of start there, Travis. You touched on a couple of the question marks. Rotation coming at right tackle. You got to assume the coaching staff would like to see that settled as quickly as possible. Elijah Pritchett, Wilkin Formby. I think we're going to see Wilkin right out of the gate get that start. We'll see how it goes rotation-wise. I would imagine Pritchett will play in the first half. But that's something to watch. The receiver rotation, something to watch, as you mentioned. I'm going to pay close attention to how much they run the football and keep it simple against Western Kentucky, and maybe get a feel for what they can do physically before they worry about what they can do with some of the more intricate stuff in the passing game. Right? Find out what you can do up front with this offense, and you know, I tried to pry on Monday at the DeBoer press conference and get under the hood a little bit about how much are you going to have to play to what you have versus rolling with what you did a year ago. And I didn't get a straight answer from Kalen DeBoer on that. He said a lot of words, probably said 100 words. But not a lot of answer in there. And you know, it's a wait and see thing for him too, I guess. You got to go by feel to some extent. But I want to see how much of this looks like Washington and how much of it looks like a coach who ain't quite ready to go full Washington yet.
Yeah, you know, DeBoer's been pretty consistent, at least publicly, in his comments about adapting to the personnel. And if that's the case, I mean, you could make a case that your top two running backs are among your top 11 guys. And even in the spring game, we saw Justice Haynes and Jam Miller out there together to open the 8A scrimmage. So I'm not going to allow myself to be surprised if Alabama comes out in a two-back set, which you go into this thinking, well, it'll definitely be one back, a tight end, three wide receivers. Maybe that will be the case. But it will be interesting from the perspective that you're talking about here, as far as this personnel and adapting it to what we've seen from Kalen DeBoer's offenses in the past. But again, running back, offensive line, I think those are the perceived strengths right now, even with the situation at right tackle. I agree with you. I will not be surprised if we see Elijah Pritchett, if Formby is the starter, still play both those guys in the first half. But running the football should be a strength, especially with that interior trio. Jaden Roberts looks like he's going to be good to go with that hand. But still, at the end of the day, I think part of the run game for Kalen DeBoer is the quick game in the passing game, the screen game in the passing game. So I'm expecting to see a good bit of that early on too. And that's where I really want to see Jalen as much as any area. I saw him last year get the ball down the field vertically. I want to see him more in the intermediate ranges and the quick game and the traditional screen game, because you know those are throws that aren't always as easy as some quarterbacks make them look.
No, when there's cheap yards short, you take those yards. I think that's what's been emphasized. I think quite a bit with Jalen Milroe this offseason, and that's not something he kind of flipped it around last year. He liked that deep. He liked to hold the ball. He liked to look for the deep ball, and he kind of went back to front. I think sometimes with his reads, and the dump off was the last thing on his mind. Flips around, I would think in this offense they're going to be looking to get that ball out. I'm sure they'll take some deep shots. That's a forte of Milroe's. If you don't take deep shots, then you're not doing what Jalen does best. So you're going to try to hit him deep.
Yeah,
But I do think we'll see a lot of passing plays where Milroe is one read and get rid of it.
yeah, and hopefully, with the flood concepts that Kalen and Nick Sheridan like to employ, we see the progression happen in real time for Jalen, with the layered type of progressions and going more from back to front, and working it between the wide receivers and CJ Dupree and these tight ends. I think they've got to be happy with their potential in this offense too, because it's a non-negotiable with Kalen DeBoer. They're going to get the football to different people. They're not going to be centric in just one area like Alabama was a year ago. And, that's going to be on Jalen in large part to show that he's capable of doing that. And, I'd like to think that we've seen progress from him on pretty much an annual basis, and that will just be another step for him.
How about Richard Young at running back, Travis? We barely saw him last year. He was a freshman, really didn't get off the bench for the Crimson Tide. Number 3 guy, you would imagine he would see some action in the backfield tomorrow. Maybe not a ton of action. Maybe it's primarily a 2-back situation. But if Alabama is able to take care of business and put this game on ice with a quarter to go, could see a good bit of Richard Young.
I'd be surprised if we didn't, because I thought he showed you even late into the spring that he was earning some trust, or should have been. Now, what we don't know for sure, what we've seen from Justice more so, and also Jam, is pass protection. So is Richard Young up to that level that you trust him enough to put him in those situations? Just in terms of on the ball, yeah, I think Richard Young is kind of like Eddie Lacy was going into maybe more 2010, 2011, moving throughout his career, because you brought him in with Trent Richardson, kind of the forgotten back in some ways. Richard Young, despite his lofty recruiting ranking from the class of 2023, maybe a little bit of that going on in that same class with Justice Haynes. But sure, again, if you think that's a primary area of strength, get those guys involved early and not just running the football. I want to see some of that traditional screen game. I want to see some mix and some variety that we really didn't see a lot of a year ago.
How about the Vegas man? Travis will jump over and see what he's got to say real quick for this game. Alabama favored by 31.5 in some precincts over the Hilltoppers, seeing an over-under of 59.5. And I'm seeing something new in the gambling sphere as we approach the 2024 college football season, Travis. It's called the implied score, right? All right. Now, your implied score is basically if Vegas nails it on the line and the over-under both, what's the score? That's what the implied score is, right? So the implied score for Alabama, Western Kentucky, if the line and the over-under both are pretty much on the money, would be 46-14. Crimson Tide, where do you think that kind of rates?
That sounds about right. I can see this offense producing points right out of the gate, because there are weapons at every level. Wide receiver, I'm very interested to see Ryan Williams, how he factors into this thing right out of the gates as a true freshman. But then Jeremy Bernard, Kobe Prentice, Kendrick Law, he's one of those X factor types, one of those toys, so to speak, that a guy like Kalen DeBoer and also Nick Sheridan are going to figure out ways to maximize his potential, both throwing it to him and probably even handing it to him some as well. So I think the pieces are there offensively to score somewhere in the low 40s. And this isn't to knock Western Kentucky, because, again, under Tyson Helton, it's been a very reputable program. But there is a lot of newness, too, for Western Kentucky. And so defensively, 14, yeah, you'd probably be okay with that as an opener. against, again, a program that year in and year out, you go back to Bobby Petrino, you go back to Jeff Brom and some of the offenses they've had there at WKU, you'd be okay with that sort of output, especially, again, with the questions that you're going to have in the back end of this defense at the secondary spots. We talked about this before. I think Western Kentucky is going to come out and challenge the perimeter early, not even so much with the deep passing game, Chase. I think they're going to throw it out there quick and see if Damani Jackson and Deshaun Jones or Xavier Brown and Devontae Smith, maybe at the Husky, Red Morgan, see if these guys can get off some blocks, set some edges against the quick game, and make Finley have to start pushing the ball down the field.
Yeah, defensively for Alabama, 14 points. You give up 14 points to Western Kentucky, it can look a couple of different ways, right? Sometimes you give up that 14, Travis, and you feel great about it because all 14 points come on the twos in the last 7 minutes, right? Other times you give up you win easy, but you give up 14, but those 14 are they're roaring down the field on your ones in the first half for a couple of touchdown drives sometimes, Travis. That's a completely different feeling if you're a DC, right?
It is. And I did a last time look back show here on the channel earlier today where we went back and we sort of watched highlights from the last time these two teams met. Alabama, Western Kentucky, it was 2016. And Alabama gave up 10 points to a Mike White quarterback Western Kentucky team. Mike White is an NFL type of quarterback now. He was with the Dolphins as a backup, now with the Bills. But Nick didn't like that touchdown at the end.
No.
Yeah, you probably remember this. Shotgun snap went off Robert Foster's leg with about a minute and a half left to go deep in Alabama's territory. Western Kentucky recovers, and the backup quarterback for Western throws a touchdown pass in the corner with about a minute to go. And Nick absolutely lost it on Lane Kiffin because you're running motion at the snap. You got Blake Barnett in there at quarterback, backup offensive line. Then the defense gives it up, and Nick just was seismic.
Apoplectic.
Yeah, it was the classic Nick Lane chewing. It was, and they just kept going to the sideline and showing Nick, and it was so yeah, you're right. There's a couple different ways you could look at it, determining that depending on how it plays out. I think Alabama, obviously, because they're still evaluating, I think, at some of these key spots, want to keep playing guys or play guys in the opener to get an idea of, how guys handle it in that situation. And so for Kane Womack, it's a potentially a great evaluation tool to go into the season with.
If you look at what Alabama's bringing back defensively, so much of the experience is up the middle on this defense, right in the middle of the field, right up front. You got Otis back, you got Tim Keenan back, linebacker. You're good to go inside, Lawson and Campbell. Defensive backfield, Malachi Moore's back there as a real veteran, played a ton of football. He's roaming around at safety. Devontae Smith, a guy with some experience for sure at that Husky position and elsewhere. They're green on the edges, right? Green on the edges on the line of scrimmage, green on the edges at corner as well. And I was talking to an old coach today who said, back in the day, especially in high school, you were all right with, you could live with that, right? Because usually you had if you were good in the middle on the line at linebacker and at safety, those guys, you had enough dogs that they could play inside out and you'd be all right. But college football in 2024, Travis, it's tough. You can't just expect all those guys to make every play.
No. And offenses more than ever want to work the perimeter. So,
right.
And it also carries over to the Wolf position for Alabama, that outside edge position with Q Robinson, who's been around forever, Keanu Coote, Quay Rasal. You're replacing Chris Braswell and Dallas freaking Turner at the edge. So that may be a spot we haven't talked about enough. And I know we're going to a different kind of defense, but you always need dynamic dudes in those spots, those edge pass rushers, and where exactly that comes from. And I think Kane will mix it up with some simulated pressures. He'll bring his Husky from time to time. He'll bring a linebacker won't always be a 5-man pass rush, but it'll be 4 with an emphasis on not exactly knowing maybe who the 4th guy is always going to be.
Sure. Helmet communications, Travis, entering one of the many changes to college football this year's 12-team playoff. There's this change. There's that change. We got SEC injury reports now. We can touch on that before we close out if you want to. But helmet communications also new. Defensive player can take advantage as well. It's not just for the quarterbacks. There's a green dot on the helmet that's live with the radio. I don't know if there's no way that'll be visible from the stadium. Obviously, that'll be a TV thing, I guess, that green dot. But the rule is, Travis, 15 seconds is all you get. And of course, once the play snapped, the communication goes dead. But do you expect to notice a difference because of this helmet communication, or do you think it's just going to look like any other game?
First, Tex Tider's checking in here. He thinks this thing's going to be easy. 52-13, Alabama Tex has it.
That's his implied score.
David Dalrymple checking in here. We appreciate all the folks checking in live here on the YouTube home. Reier on YouTube. Nice to see you guys back together with a pod again, David says. And he also mentions North Dakota State right now, giving Prime all he wants in Boulder. But to get to the helmet question, I think it's actually going to benefit the defense more, in my opinion, because it seems like more so in college, you got all these tempo, high octane, NASCAR kind of offenses, right?
Right.
So communication is at a maximum premium on the defensive side of the ball. So I think to be able to have that in helmet communication should help defenses in college. More so than even the offenses. It'll be interesting with the tablets too, how that impacts things. I think we're already seeing how it's impacting field versus booth, right? In terms of assistant coaches, who do you want upstairs? Who do you want downstairs? And also what's impacting that is now analysts are pretty much involved, on a day-to-day basis. So there's a lot of things coming in at once with the helmet communication and the tablets and technology. You said it with the injury reports. I'm thinking the man likes those real good.
He's okay with them. Yeah.
But the man, he just kind of looks at those and goes, "That's nice." He's got his other, he's got his other channels he works through, for more in depth and specific information where those are concerned. But yeah, this is definitely one of those defining entry points for a lot of different things now impacting the college game.
What's interesting to me is the way the rules set up. It's 15 seconds left on the play clock. That's when it's going to go dead, or the snap of the ball, whichever ever comes first. So if you're a hurry up offense, Travis, and you're jumping up to the line as soon as the ball gets set, you're giving that middle linebacker maximum time back and forth with his coordinator as far as what he's looking at formation wise, pre-snap, motion, whatever the case may be. But if you sit back, right, and huddle up, or maybe just kind of slow play the formation a little bit, you're burning clock on that middle linebacker's line, right, to the coordinator. So do you think we'll see offenses slow play things a little, maybe to burn that advantage you're talking about?
Maybe, but I think Florida State, Georgia Tech, if you go back and watch that game last weekend, I think there were like 7 possessions each for those teams, something in that neighborhood for both of those teams for the game. Now, I don't think either one of those are known as fastball offenses, as Nick Saban likes to refer to them as, but a play ends, the 40-second clock is supposed to crank up, but I don't know if that's always happening. So, you're looking at the potential before that clock goes off with the in helmet. You could be looking at 30 full seconds, on both sides of the ball. So I don't know if it behooves you to slow down more than to say go faster and try to continue to put the stress on the defense from that perspective.
DeBoer kind of hinted earlier this week too, Travis, that the very beginning of the window to talk to the quarterback might be a chance to talk about what just happened and not what's about to happen. Now, obviously, the next play is always the most important play, so there won't be a ton of that.
Especially when you got a tablet over there too now.
Yeah. Technology.
Yeah, you're real time replaying.
Yeah.
And you've got that extra time on the headset. I mean, it's almost like a mini film session between snaps now in college football. Yeah, that's where we're at.
The ticket man doesn't need that new technology, Travis. Let's touch on him, see where he's at. Now, let me ask, I don't know if you looked and seen where the prices are on this game?
I haven't.
Okay. Well, then I can ask you.
I leave that to you.
I'm gonna throw you a pitch here and you hit it as far as you can hit it. So, would you say that excitement over Kalen DeBoer's debut at Alabama has spiked and or impacted ticket prices for Western Kentucky, or the option B, are the prices rock bottom like is typical for a game like this?
I think I would guess they're higher than they would have been even if Nick Saban were still the head coach.
Yeah.
I'll go higher because it's one of those you want to be able to say you were there.
Right.
Moments.
Right.
Possibly. Now, I don't know many people that say, I was there for Mike Shula's first game, in retrospect. But if this thing goes according to hopes and plans, sure. I mean, it's like Western Carolina for Nick. Everybody wanted to say they were there. So I would go higher demand than maybe typically would be the case for WKU. Where am I at on that?
Get in price is under $20. So it is rock bottom. You could I went on StubHub right before we came on. I saw some tickets for anywhere from $12 to $20. However, not a ton of them, and there were some bad seats that were 50 or more.
Okay.
Right. So it's not like you can get in for under 20 all the way around the upper deck.
Right.
That's not the case.
And we've talked about this before on the show in the past, in previous years.
Yeah.
It's really become about premium seating. That's where the ticket man, even at Alabama, has to butter his bread these days, or she does, because that's where you can do the most. I would think in terms of your margins is where the premium seating is concerned. 400 level, those type of tickets, I mean, they are what they are. No one's going to get rich off those anymore.
Nope, definitely not. But nevertheless, a ton of excitement for DeBoer's debut. I know Alabama's got USF coming up in week 2, another home game. Then it's off to Wisconsin, take on the Badgers. Looking ahead, Travis, first road game, communication on the offensive line, always something you want to make sure is right on the road. How do you look, just looking ahead a little bit, how do you see that game against Wisconsin? They didn't have a great season last year. What do you think they'll get from the Badgers up there?
Yeah, it's hard to say. Tyler Van Dyke in as the quarterback now of the Badgers. And that sort of quarterback carousel around college football, the former Miami Hurricane now up there, going to be the quarterback at Camp Randall. Yeah, I guess there's always a little bit of anxiety when you go on the road for the first time to that sort of environment, but you've got the veteran quarterback and Jalen Milroe, so you should feel comfortable about that. Jalen's played obviously on some big stages. That's typically where I default to when I think about first big road game of the season. I think quarterback.
Right.
Jalen should be fine. And, I just think playing a couple of games, it'd be one thing if the opener was up there, but you get a couple of games under your belt. I know the student section and all that at Wisconsin, Penn State, the Big Ten schools, they're always really, really into it. But I just don't see it being that big of a deal. I mean, if Alabama loses that game, I don't think it'll have much to do with the environment or crowd noise or anything like that.
As far as you're right. You do think quarterback first when you're talking about on the road, especially if it's a guy that hadn't started before and Milroe does have experience. Next, you think center. right? And Parker Brailsford, who presumably is going to be handling all these calls for the offensive line, been in this system. You know, you can count on him for understanding the offense. But yeah, making sure that the tackles can hear you as a, you know.
And you're really going to be old at all those spots: quarterback,
Yeah.
center, middle linebacker, safeties, Malachi Moore, right? I mean, communication, those type of things. At every spot, you would want to have an older guy. Alabama's got that right now.
Yeah. Interior of the offensive line ought to be a strong point for this, a big strong point for this team. If it's not, there's going to be problems. But yeah, Booker, Brailsford, Roberts, those three ought to be anchors for sure.
Should be. And I mean, Caden Proctor back at left tackle. I think they'll be fine at right tackle. They've got capable tight ends too. I mean, you got to extend that offensive line to those guys where the run game is concerned. With CJ Dupree, Josh Cuevas coming in from Washington, Oots has been around, played a lot of football. They should be very, very solid. They should be able to, when they get an opportunity and take control of games, they should be able to lean on that with the run game and the interior of that offensive line and those backs, and then in a way help that defense that is still finding its legs maybe in the secondary, and control games more. So I think we all think of Kalen and those offenses as explosive, and I think that'll be the case. But when you got a couple of score lead, maybe at Wisconsin or somewhere else, you should be able to shorten that game up if that's what you want to do with that run game and those backs.
All right, Travis, we'll finish it off kind of where we started it, talking about the week that is around college football. You've got Georgia Clemson going on Saturday, Florida, Miami, Texas A&M, LSU. Real quick, how do you see one or more of those shaping up?
Intrigued by Clemson and Georgia. I don't know if Trevor Etienne, doesn't sound like he's going to play in his UGA debut, the transfer from Florida at the running back position. Carson Beck, obviously you feel good about that. What about Cade Klubnik, the quarterback for Clemson? Is this guy at some point in his Clemson career going to kind of get over the hump? Because you go back to Trevor Lawrence, and there was this sort of, because Trevor was so good after Deshaun Watson, you just kind of said, well, DJ Uiagalelei is going to be maybe even an upgrade on Trevor Lawrence. That did not happen.
Right.
Then it was, well, Cade Klubnik will definitely be an upgrade on DJ.
Yeah.
That hasn't necessarily happened yet. That's a game Georgia should win. I think they're a 13.5 point favorite. I could see them covering that. I know Clemson feels like up front defensively, they're back to where they were maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So that'll be a fun matchup with that Georgia offensive line. Miami and Florida, who the heck knows, right? In Gainesville. I don't trust Mario in some of these situations, especially as it gets later in games. The two quarterbacks are a big storyline. Graham Mertz, Cam Ward, the transfer for Miami, big game for both those coaches. Texas A&M and Notre Dame's very interesting because Texas A&M is actually the favorite in that game. Mike Elko's first game as the head coach, and just feels like a culture change happening there in College Station with Elko.
Yeah.
I expect a more efficient game day product than what we saw under Jimbo. But it's really it's a good Saturday. And as you said earlier, you get into Sunday. I think LSU-SC has a chance to be the game of the weekend.
Could be.
Because I know there's new quarterbacks for both these teams, but I still think these offenses have a chance to put up some points. Two new defensive coordinators, one for each team in that. So, yeah, I mean, it's just going to be a fun weekend, really, from start to finish.
Yeah, 64 is the total on that LSU Southern Cal game, and I like the under there because I think Brian Kelly's going to try to pound that ground game on Southern Cal a little bit, maybe some clock. So we'll see how that one goes. But Clemson plus 13.5 against the Dogs, kind of like Clemson there. Concerned about Cade Klubnik, as you noted, he's not the known quantity that he's not the known commodity that Carson Beck is. Certainly, I think Cade might have gotten that extra Texas gunslinger star.
Yeah,
right, Travis.
I mean, he's from Austin,
Lone Star State. Yeah.
Drew Brees. I mean, do I need to say more?
Sometimes those Texas gunslingers they just flip them that extra star, you know.
Yeah.
But
I watch Kate Klubnik. I see it. Like, you see the tools, but there's just some inexplicable situations that seem to happen. So yeah,
I
think
Clemson to cover. I think 13.5 is too much.
It might be. Georgia might struggle to score.
Yeah.
They might. If too much of it's put on Carson Beck in that passing game because of ETN being out and maybe banged up a little bit at the running back position. I got trust issues with Klubnik. I think Phil Maffa, the running back with Will Shipley moving on to the Philadelphia Eagles, it's a big game for him. I like his sort of makeup physically to go against that Georgia defense because he's one of those 6'1", 220 types. You know, he can go get 4 or 5 yards and kind of keep drives going, maybe for that Clemson offense. I think Clemson's offensive line, though, is the key to the whole thing. I mean, if they can't hold up a little bit against that Georgia front seven, then you put Klubnik in that situation where he can turn the football over maybe a good bit. So just some things to consider. We got David Dalrymple here in the comments. We appreciate the comments, guys. We appreciate you, by the way. If you haven't already subscribed to our channel here, just hit that subscribe button. See that notifications bell. Hit that while you're at it. That way you get all the content as it drops. And also hit us with a like if you don't mind. A thumbs up would help the program a lot as well. David Dalrymple, Byron Young went to Philly. I saw where Byron was waived.
Las Vegas.
So, you know, Philly loves some Bama UGA, don't they?
Yeah.
So that would make sense. And then David asked, what do you think of LRZ for the Jags? What am I missing about LRZ, Goodbread? That abbreviation.
It's a Jags question, so that probably heads your way more than mine. I
don't know, but I don't know if he's asking about a Bama guy to the
Yeah.
Jags or
I'm
Lawrence.
thinking initials here and just
Lawrence?
coming up a little empty.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. I'm not coming up with it, Dave. Let's see. Maybe he's got more for me. Reese. Oh, Reese Zammit. Okay. He's the new international path player that they just signed. I think at the tight end position. Yeah, the rugby player. I got you. Yeah, they just signed him. You know, they had Patrick Murtaugh from Australia. Yeah, they got these international pathway players now, Goodbread. You can have one on your roster. Murtaugh broke his ankle, I believe it was, in training camp. So we'll see. You know, it's always interesting to see with these former rugby players, Australian rules players. I don't know enough about him, probably, Dave, but it's an intriguing signing. We'll see how it goes.
There was a kid, we'll get out of here in just a second, but there was a kid, I want to say, 6, 8 years ago, maybe, that the Minnesota Vikings drafted on the last day. This is when Mike Zimmer was kind of running it. And he was a German player who would probably I think he'd only played like 1 year of football. Might have been some kind of 8-man football or something over in Germany, but somehow or another, he'd blown it away on size and speed, right? He got clocked at a crazy number in the 40 for his size, and the Vikings took a chance on him, like, see what we can do with this guy just athletically. He's off the charts, so who knows? And
Alabama's got some international pathway players. Justin Okoronkwo, the freshman linebacker. I'm interested to see if we maybe see him a little bit on Saturday night.
Elias Olinen, the offensive lineman from Finland, right?
Yeah.
They got a couple.
Got a few. Yeah, got a few.
Who was
James Burnip from Australia?
The original Alabama football international player, Travis. Was it not McKay Loescher, or was it that's the oldest one I can think of. I'm sure
Loescher would be up there. Yeah. Peter Kim, the kicker from the Bryant era, but I think he was Hawaiian. So but no, I would, it's a great question to kind of figure that out now that we've extended it.
Canadian pass rusher, that Naughton McKay Loescher.
Yeah, Naughton was something else. Yeah. Nodding with something else. Wild times back then. Yeah.
Yes. Lean for the W's. It was the W's were hard to come by in some of those years.
Oh, they were precious.
It's going to do it for this edition of Talkin Tide podcast. Had a ton of fun as always with Travis Reier. We will recap Alabama's game against Western Kentucky on the back end of the weekend. Looking forward to doing that as well. For Travis Reier, I'm Chase Goodbread of the Tuscaloosa News. We'll talk to you next time right here on Talkin Tide.